Come on.
Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that make me. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex.
Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About Sex. Just want to let you know that this is brought to you by the kind courtesy of JTV, Channel 55, Z-Rod 103.7 FM, CCT Global Communications, and the HIV/AIDS Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is a show where we're continuing the last show that we had. This is part 2. So please, call a friend, text a friend, let them know. Remember, once you text them from CCT to our CCT number, it's free. And, just let them know, tune in, because tonight we'll basically be opening a lot of interesting topics where, it worth your while. All right? Doc, what's up? How are you?
Good night. I want to also follow up on what you're just saying. Last week we had a show on a similar topic. It was called the Secret Epidemic, Child Abuse and Statutory Rape. And we're calling this show Part 2. Last week we had a panel of all men who gave us their opinion, and also we explored different issues about the subject but from male point of view. This week we have a panel of women, and I would like the women to just introduce themselves. So we'll start here.
Shonda Jeffers, Director of Family Support Network.
Aletta Bickerton, a member of the HIV/AIDS Foundation.
Adonica Malone, member of the HIV/AIDS Foundation.
Yvonne Hodge-Grant, I'm a counselor.
Welcome. I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. And what we want to do is to get right into the topic. So I just want to start off by asking you if sexual abuse is something that you hear talked about in the community. Do you hear your friends or colleagues, neighbors talking about sexual abuse?
Well, as I was talking earlier, it's something that we hear, but usually only when something happens in the community. Mm-hmm. Like you may hear on the news that somebody was arrested for sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. Then there's a lot of discussion, but then it tends to die out after that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyone else want to add to that?
Well, sorry. Well, I would say the same thing. It's not a topic that you hear all the time. Again, it's just when it happens, it's talked about, and then it dies out. And then that's it.
So it's like a flash.
Yes.
Something that happened, and then it doesn't get revisited. Why do you think that happens? Why do you think we tend to do that?
I think it's something that people are not usually comfortable talking about.
Not comfortable?
Yeah, talking about sexual abuse.
Because?
I don't know. I think it's something that maybe people are not educated about, or, it's just something that's just one of those things.
You think we want to hide it, or keep it a secret as we've identified it?
Yeah, but then why you speak about it when it happens then? Because everybody's speaking about it, I guess.
You see, at that time, persons tend to talk about it with disgust. And then they start to look for explanations, reason why this happened. But then, as I said, we're not comfortable. I think it's as a society, we're not comfortable talking about sex on a whole. And then sexual abuse, we're not comfortable talking about it.
But everybody does sex.
That is true.
At some point.
Right. Yeah. Not sexual abuse, but I mean, realistically, the majority of people engage in sexual activity.
But we see, we are culture, we've never been comfortable talking about sex. And only recently, persons, are talking more about sex openly. I know as a counselor, when I worked in the schools, in primary schools, even talking about body parts was a problem for young children. Because it's not something that they would talk about at home. Parents don't discuss sex with their children. We have more liberal parents nowadays, but it's something more, it's something new. It's not something that's been around for a while. And as a society, I think that's something that we need to look into.
Do you think that contributes to the problem, where people, engage in sexual activity, but because it's sort of taboo, it contributes to the preoccupation or the acting out? That's a heavy question.
I personally don't think so. I think when we talk about sexual abuse, for me it's not talked about because to the other side of sexual abuse is bad. It shouldn't happen, or when it happened, you feel, or the person feels, at least that's what I think, looked down upon, like because they think they've done something wrong or bad. Not so much to the person that's done it, but to the person it's happened to. And therefore, we tend to not speak about it openly, and maybe, I don't know, and maybe because of that, people think it's okay to continue doing it because it's going to go away, and once it go away, then it's not talked about, and then you hear it again. And a lot of times, because it's talked about and it doesn't go anywhere, then people probably think it's okay. I don't know.
So you think that the community is sort of giving the message that it's okay, sexual abuse, child sexual abuse is okay. Is that what you're saying?
Not exactly saying that, but in some ways, because of how it is handled.
Right.
You understand, the end result sometimes is not really positive or not good. And therefore, I think we're sending mixed messages. We're not, I think sometimes it's really that the person, the abuser, and am I saying it right now? The person that's affected.
The victim.
The victim.
The victim, right. The victim is
Victimized sometimes.
exactly sometimes they're being I don't know how to say that. This is so hard. The abuser feel like they've done something wrong and it's your fault. And if it's my fault, then I'm not gonna do anything about it. Or it gets to a certain point and it becomes it's your fault kind of thing, and then it is dropped.
Well, that is part of the problem, because very often the victim is made to feel like they did something wrong or they encouraged it. This is a pattern that very often repeats itself, especially with young girls that are abused. Young girls are identified as asking for it. How could a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old girl ask to be sexually abused, okay? And the same thing with boys. When boys are sexually abused, so they're identified also as sort of asking for it. He wanted it. So, I did this with him. And we must remember that both boys and girls are sexually abused. We tend to focus primarily on women, young girls, females. But boys get abused also, but we hear less of boys being abused because very often boys are afraid to share that they were abused. So they act it out in ways that are not very clear. They become disruptive in school, or they become delinquent, or they become abusers. But girls, more often, will eventually show signs and symptoms or share that information with their parent or some other adult.
Well, you see, to add to that, you're right with it, but in a boy's point of view, where if a boy is being the victim in child abuse or sexually abuse, actually, put it that way, it's hard for him to come out and say something, because whereas he still have to live his life one, and he have friends guys who ain't his friend, and in any book, once you have any intercourse with a boy, is labeled at a certain nature where, you know, that this is where you label as. So with a girl point of view now, a girl can do it over a period of time where she build that courage to speak, but a boy will never build that courage and want to get it out. So that's why I sit there with that.
Anyone have an issue with what Craig just said?
Yes. I don't understand why you feel that boys, it's harder for boys to speak out. Because I think if that's how we feel, we need to help change that. Because as long as a child, boy or girl, is being sexually abused, we should find a way to help them speak out as early as possible so it does not continue to happen. And I understand what you're saying, you know, being labeled and...
Is a name calling, that's a whole method,
Yeah,
the
being labeled
name
as
calling.
being
But
gay
then
or-
if we have a situation where, I mean, if it's Cancer Week, Cancer Month, Senior Citizen Week, Senior Citizen Month, however we call it, we have a series of months that take place with series of different things. And the only time we pay advertisement and attention to it is when it comes the week before it or the week of it. So we tend to pick up in that only when it happened, we speak about it.
Reactive.
You know, so just like if a young lady or child is being sexually abused, it happened now, we speak about it now.
I
Next
understand,
one.
I understand what you're saying, but I truly believe that we've come a distance from that. I think we are talking about issues more frequently in the community, whether it be cancer or something else, and especially about sexual abuse of children, because it's happening so frequently. It's there in front of us more often, on the radio, in the newspaper, and like shows like this, we're talking about it. So I think we've come away forward with that. But I wanted to pick up on what you said, because what you said tends to connect with this male image, you know, that for a boy, if a boy is sexually abused, you know, he doesn't talk about it, or he hides it because it labels him. You know, it doesn't label him any more than a young girl who's sexually abused, you know?
It doesn't, but I mean, when you look at it, yeah, we need the boys to come forward and, you know, say if they're being abused. But at the end of the day, by coming forward and saying that I'm in a class where it's 12, 15 of us in this class, 9 is boys, X amount is girls, is the name calling that a girl will receive is going to be worse that a boy will receive.
Okay, but I want to jump in here because I think we're giving the wrong message to our viewing and listening audience by saying that. I think that will reinforce among young boys that they shouldn't talk about sexual abuse if they're sexually abused. We want them to come out and talk, just like we want the young girls to come out and talk about it. Go to their parent, go to their guidance counselor, go to their teacher, some adult in the community, and talk about it. Because if they don't talk about it, what they do is internalize it, and they blame themselves, or they act it out in some way, or they become homosexual. So we need to encourage the boys as well as the girls to talk about it. And now I'd like to show a clip related to what we're talking about.
I thought I was broken most of my life. I struggled, fought, cried, prayed, and meditated my way back to me. While he was raping me, I felt like I left my body because I thought I was gonna die. So I wasn't present there, and actually I had agreed to die at that point. My grandmother just died last year, but she took me from my mom for about 3 months. And I don't think I would have lived without if my grandmother hadn't done that. Like, she nurtured me and sheltered me and brought me back to myself. Because of my upbringing and just the pride that was instilled with me, I was able to continue to do so many successful things. I graduated from UC Berkeley. I'm a teacher. I've taught for 14 years. I've motivated many young people to be their greatest selves. And even throughout my pain, I was still able to help other people work through their own shame and guilt and even denial about childhood sexual abuse.
Okay. There's a young man who obviously was sexually abused when he was young. And he went through obvious trauma in terms of what the experience itself, and also obviously had to go through a whole restructuring of his image of himself and finding himself. And thank God he had a supportive grandmother in his life who helped him through that. So we do know that young men, especially if they don't have this support in their family or their community, internalize that and don't always have the positive outcome that this young man had. Any reactions?
Well, as you say, it is important to have that support, and young men or young boys should know that even if they don't have the support at home, they can get it in the community. There's so many community agencies, the churches. A lot of the churches, have counselors or pastors who would work with these young boys, and especially some of them may be looking for a male figure. They can find that in the community. It doesn't have to be a family member, somebody who they can trust and they can speak to. So it's important that they know that as well.
And to add to what Ms. Grant was saying, social development has the Big Brother program.
Right.
There's a lot of different things that's going on within the community that, boys can get support.
Right. To relate to a healthy male figure.
Exactly.
But we also know there are unhealthy male figures. I mean, the Catholic Church is going through this whole turmoil for the past several years in which priests who were, very available male figures for young boys to identify with, especially boys who didn't have fathers. And many of those priests were child molesters. They molested the boys. So we need to, again, communicate with our children, give our children the education so that they know that they can say no to someone and that they have an idea of what's right, what's wrong, good touch, bad touch.
I think all of this starts from the home because, as Ms. Grant was saying earlier, it's difficult for some parents to talk about sex in itself and talking about body parts because some children still call body parts different names. And as a guidance counselor, I had to, I brought in someone from the college, a biology teacher, to talk about, sex and sexual transmitted diseases. And the kids giggled, and it was quite uncomfortable for some kids because they haven't heard about it, and they haven't, they weren't taught from home about, boundaries, good touch, bad touch. So parents, I think, shy away from doing that, some parents, and they expect probably the teachers and the guidance counselors to take care of that or to, take that role.
Right, because they feel awkward or uncomfortable. The reality is that 1 in 3 girls are sexually molested, and 1 in 5 boys are sexually molested. And so, we need to look at that. Even though there's a difference in percentages, it's still a high number. So, we need to do more education, we need to do more preparation.
I think it's come a long way because growing up, you were hearing neighbor talk about, this is what's going on in this household, but no one would say anything. And I think, a lot of people are doing, educating the public, reaching in the schools, different agencies, teaching people about, sexual abuse. It's a crime. It's all over the media. And I think it's a bit more open for people to be able to understand and, make changes.
Ladies and gentlemen, you got it locked to JTV Channel 55 and ZWAD 103.7 FM. Let's talk about sex. We got to take a small commercial break. We'll be right back after these words.
Come on. Let's talk about sex, baby.